I never planned to check James's phone that Tuesday afternoon. 15 years of marriage had built a foundation of trust that I never questioned, until that moment when his phone buzzed repeatedly on the kitchen counter while he showered upstairs. 3 messages from Sarah W. flashed across the screen, each more intimate than the last. My hands trembled as I picked up the device, telling myself I was overreacting. Sarah was his colleague, nothing more. But something in my gut knew better. The passcode, our anniversary date, unlocked more than just his phone. It unlocked a parallel life I never knew existed. Hundreds of messages dating back 6 months. Photos I couldn't bear to look at for more than a second. Hotel receipts. Inside jokes. Plans for their future. Their future, not ours. I sat at our kitchen island, the granite counter cold against my arms, as the afternoon light streamed through windows I'd chosen when we renovated. Everything in this house held a memory. The scratched dining table from our first apartment, the overpriced sofa we'd argued about but eventually splurged on, the gallery wall of family photos that now seemed like artifacts from a fictional life. "Emma, have you seen my phone?" James called from upstairs, his voice casual, unsuspecting. I placed the phone exactly where he'd left it, screen dark, secrets momentarily contained within. "It's on the counter," I replied, amazed at how steady my voice sounded when everything inside me was collapsing. When he came downstairs, hair still damp, wearing the blue shirt I'd given him for Christmas, I searched his face for signs of the stranger he'd become. How had I missed it? The late nights at the office, the business trips that seemed to multiply, the emotional distance I'd attributed to work stress. "I'm heading out to meet Mark for that networking thing," he said, kissing my cheek, a gesture that now felt like acid on my skin. "Don't wait up." Mark. Another lie. He was meeting her. "Have a good time," I said, the words tasting bitter. I watched him grab his keys, whistling as he headed out the door of our suburban Boston home, completely unaware that I'd just witnessed the death of our marriage. After he left, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call my sister or my best friend Lisa. Instead, I walked through each room of our house with new eyes, noticing details I'd overlooked, how his side of the closet had gradually thinned out, how certain shirts never came home for laundering, how his favorite books had disappeared from the nightstand. I poured myself a glass of the expensive Cabernet we'd been saving for our anniversary next month, and sat on our back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and orange. The irony wasn't lost on me. Such beauty on the day my world imploded. My phone buzzed with a text from our daughter Maddie at college. "How's your day going, Mom?" How was my day going? How could I possibly answer that? I typed back, "All good here. How's the study group for finals?" Another lie to add to the growing collection in this house. As darkness fell, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the shadows, mentally walking backward through our years together, searching for the moment when we began to drift apart. Was it after Maddie left for college? Was it during his promotion 3 years ago? Was it when I decided to go back to teaching part-time instead of being available whenever he needed me? Or had the capacity for this betrayal always been there, dormant, waiting for the right moment, or the right person, to activate it? One thing became crystal clear as I sat alone in our darkened house. I refused to be the woman who didn't know, and then, once knowing, did nothing. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of reclaiming myself from the wreckage James had so carelessly created. But tonight, I would allow myself to feel everything. The shock, the rage, the grief for a future that would never come to pass. And somewhere beneath it all, a tiny flicker of something unexpected. Relief. The relief of finally understanding why I'd felt so alone, even when we were together. Sleep never came that night. I watched the bedroom ceiling as headlights occasionally swept across it, illuminating the space James and I had shared for over a decade. When the first light of dawn filtered through our curtains, I was already showered and dressed, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. James hadn't come home. No call, no text, just the deafening silence of a marriage in its death throes. Sometime around 3 a.m. he'd sent a message. "Staying at Mark's, early meeting tomorrow." Another lie to add to the collection. I called in sick to the high school where I taught English literature. My students would have to discuss Jane Eyre without me today. How fitting. A novel about a woman deceived by the man she loved. My colleagues would understand. I'd never taken a sick day in 3 years. When the house became too suffocating with its memories, I drove to Revere Beach. The November wind whipped across the shoreline, keeping most people away. Perfect. I needed solitude. I walked along the water's edge, my footprints quickly erased by the incoming tide, much like how James had tried to erase any evidence of his betrayal. My phone buzzed. Lisa, my best friend since college, the godmother to Maddie, the woman who'd held my hand through my father's funeral last year. Brunch at Rosie's? Her text read. I have drama to share about the neighbor's new landscaping disaster. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Lisa and her husband Richard had been our closest friends for years. Double dates, shared vacations, holiday traditions. Did I have the strength to maintain the facade? To smile and nod while she described suburban disputes over property lines? Can't today, I typed back, feeling under the weather. Another small lie. The tide came in further, soaking my sneakers. I didn't move. The cold was clarifying, shocking my system back to reality. I had decisions to make, practical ones. Where would I sleep tonight? Could I bear to be in our bed, knowing what I knew? Should I confront him immediately, or gather more information? Did I even want to fight for something that James had so willingly discarded? My wedding ring caught the weak November sunlight, the diamond sparkling despite the overcast day. 15 years encapsulated in a circle of platinum. I twisted it, remembering his face as he'd slid it onto my finger. He'd been crying. The only time I'd seen him cry until his mother's death 7 years ago. Had those tears been genuine? Had any of it been real? Back in my car, I sat with the heater running, watching seagulls fight over a discarded sandwich. My phone's screen lit up with James's face. A photo taken last summer in Cape Cod, his smile wide, his arm around my shoulder. I let it ring. Then a text. Everything okay? School called looking for you. Of course they had. James was listed as my emergency contact. He was woven into every aspect of my life. My husband, my emergency contact, my betrayer. Fine, I wrote back. Just needed a day. Not a lie, but nowhere near the truth. I started the drive back, but couldn't face our empty house. Instead, I found myself parking outside the office building where James worked, 15 floors of glass and steel in downtown Boston. His domain. I'd attended cocktail parties here, smiled at his colleagues, played the role of supportive wife. Was Sarah inside right now? Did she sit near him? Did they steal glances across conference tables, share private jokes while other colleagues remained oblivious? Did she know about me? About Maddie? Did she care? The questions multiplied, each one more painful than the last. I realized I was torturing myself, searching for logic in something fundamentally illogical. There was no explanation that would make this hurt less. As I pulled away from the curb, a strange calm settled over me. The initial shock was receding, leaving behind something harder, more resolute. I drove to the bank, not our usual branch where the tellers knew us by name, but one across town, and opened a new account in my name only. I transferred half of our joint savings. Not vindictively, but practically. I would need resources for whatever came next. Back home, I finally allowed myself to enter our bedroom. I packed a small bag, enough clothes for a few days, my laptop, the dog-eared copy of poetry Maddie had given me last Christmas, basic necessities. Then I called the one person who would understand without judgment. Aunt Emma? My niece's voice was bright with surprise. What's up? Rachel, I said, my voice finally breaking. I need a place to stay for a few days. Can I use your spare room? There was only a moment's pause before she answered. I'll have clean sheets on the bed in 30 minutes. Rachel's Cambridge apartment became my sanctuary. My 28-year-old niece asked no questions when I arrived. Eyes swollen and voice hoarse. She simply took my bag, guided me to her spare room, more of a glorified closet with a futon, and handed me a glass of wine. Whenever you're ready, she said, squeezing my shoulder before leaving me alone with my thoughts. My phone had been buzzing incessantly. James had progressed from casual inquiry to concern to anger. By evening, he'd left 6 voicemails, each more desperate than the last. "Emma, where are you? Emma, I'm worried. Please call me. This isn't funny anymore. Call me back. I called Lisa. She hasn't seen you. What the hell is going on? I'm going to call the police if I don't hear from you soon. Please, just let me know you're safe." The last one nearly broke my resolve. The tremor in his voice sounded like genuine fear. How could he sound so concerned about my whereabouts when he'd been so careless with my heart? Around 9, I sent a text. "I'm safe. Need some time. Don't call the police." Minimal, but enough to stop him from filing a missing person report. His response was immediate. "What's happening? Talk to me." I turned off my phone. Rachel and I ate takeout Thai food on her small balcony, watching the lights of Boston twinkle across the Charles River. When she finally asked what happened, I told her everything. The texts, the photos, the hotel receipts. "That absolute bastard," she whispered, refilling my wine glass. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to beg. I'm not going to become bitter. And I'm not going to let this define the rest of my life." That night, on Rachel's lumpy futon, I slept deeply for the first time in what felt like years. The next morning brought clarity. I needed professional advice before confronting James. Rachel gave me a name, Diane Levinson, a divorce attorney she'd met through a colleague. "She's a shark," Rachel said, "but the kind you want on your side." Diane's office was sleek, but welcoming. She listened without interruption as I laid out the situation, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. "Do you want to try to save your marriage?" she asked when I finished, her question direct but not unkind. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Is there anything to save?" She nodded, understanding the real question. "Before we discuss divorce options, I recommend you do 3 things. First, document everything. Dates, times, any evidence of the affair. Second, consult a financial advisor to understand your complete financial picture. And third, consider what you want your life to look like 6 months from now, regardless of James's actions." That third task occupied my thoughts as I left her office. What did I want my life to look like? For so long, my vision of the future had included James. Now I needed to reimagine everything. I turned my phone back on to find a dozen missed calls and a text from Maddie. "Dad says you're not home. What's going on?" My heart sank. James had involved our daughter. I called her immediately. "Mom?" Her voice was small, worried. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, honey," I said, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "Your dad and I are going through some things right now. I'm staying with Rachel for a few days." "Are you getting divorced?" The directness of her question stunned me. College-aged children see more than we give them credit for. "I don't know yet," I answered, the same words I'd given Diane. "But whatever happens between your dad and me has nothing to do with our love for you. That will never change." After promising to keep her updated, I faced my next challenge, returning to the house to collect more of my belongings. I chose mid-morning, when I knew James would be at work. Except he wasn't. His car sat in our driveway, alongside another I didn't recognize, a red Audi with Massachusetts plates. My hands gripped the steering wheel as realization dawned. He'd brought her to our home. Something snapped inside me. I parked directly behind both cars, blocking them in, and marched to the front door. My key slid into the lock. A home I'd been afraid to enter yesterday was now a place I refused to be kept from. The house was quiet, but a woman's leather jacket hung on the coat rack beside James's. 2 wine glasses sat on the coffee table. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step fueling a courage I didn't know I possessed. Our bedroom door was closed. I didn't knock. James and a blonde woman scrambled to cover themselves with our duvet, the one with the small blue flowers that his mother had given us as a wedding present. Her eyes were wide with shock, his face drained of color. "Emma," he gasped. "I can explain." I cut him off with a raised hand. "I came to get my things." My voice was steady, my gaze unflinching. "I'll give you 10 minutes to get dressed and get out. Both of you." I turned and walked downstairs, my heart pounding but my mind surprisingly clear. I heard their rushed movements, murmured conversations. the awkward shuffling of clothes being hastily put on. When they came downstairs, I was sitting on the sofa, looking through the photo album from our honeymoon. I didn't look up. "Emma, please," James started. "This isn't what it looks like." I finally met his gaze. "I think it's exactly what it looks like. I saw your text 2 days ago, James. I know everything." The woman, Sarah, tugged at James's sleeve. "I should go," she mumbled, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Yes, you should," I agreed, still eerily calm. "But before you leave, I'd like to know how long you've been sleeping with my husband in my bed." Sarah looked at James, panic evident in her eyes. He stepped between us, as if to shield her. The protective gesture hurt more than finding them together. "Emma, this isn't her fault," he said. "If you want to be angry with me." "Oh, I am," I assured him. "But she knew you were married. She's been to our holiday parties. She asked me for my butterscotch cookie recipe last Christmas." The absurdity of that detail suddenly struck me. This woman had complimented my baking while planning to steal my husband. Sarah had the decency to look ashamed. "I never meant for this to happen," she offered weakly. "Nobody ever does," I replied. "And yet, here we are." She slipped past me, grabbing her jacket on the way out. The front door closed with a soft click that felt oddly final. James and I stood in our living room, surrounded by the artifacts of our shared life: wedding photos, vacation souvenirs, the painting we'd bought in Provincetown on our 10th anniversary. The silence stretched between us like a living thing. "How did you find out?" he finally asked. "Does it matter?" I countered. "Would you have preferred I remained ignorant while you carried on?" He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. I was going to end it. A bitter laugh escaped me. "When? Before or after bringing her into our home? Into our bed?" "I made a terrible mistake," he said, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "But what we have, 15 years, Emma, that has to count for something." "It counted for something," I corrected him. Past tense. I moved through our home methodically, gathering clothes, toiletries, important documents. James followed me like a shadow, alternating between apologies and justifications. The affair had meant nothing. He'd been confused. Work pressure had driven him to seek comfort elsewhere. He loved me, not her. Each excuse landed like a slap. "Why her?" I asked as I packed my jewelry box, carefully separating pieces he'd given me from family heirlooms. "Of all the women you could have betrayed me with, why someone I had to face at company functions? It just happened," he said, the inadequacy of his explanation hanging in the air between us. In our bathroom, I found her toothbrush next to his. Pink, brand new. This wasn't impulsive. He'd invited her into our space with premeditation. I dropped it into the trash and continued packing. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "Tell me how to fix this." I paused, meeting his gaze in the bathroom mirror. "You can't fix this, James. Some things, once broken, stay that way. Are you filing for divorce?" His voice cracked on the last word. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I do know I won't be staying here tonight, or tomorrow, or anytime soon." He followed me downstairs, watching as I loaded my suitcases into my car. The November air had turned colder, matching the chill that had settled in my chest. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "That's no longer your concern." His face hardened slightly. "Maddie will ask. What should I tell her?" The mention of our daughter pierced through my armor. "Tell her the truth," I said. "That her father couldn't keep his promises." "That's not fair," he protested. "None of this is fair," I countered, slamming the trunk closed. "But we're long past fairness, aren't we?" As I opened my car door, he grabbed my arm. Not roughly, but with the urgency of a drowning man. "I'll do anything," he pleaded. "Counseling. Whatever you want." I gently removed his hand. "What I want is to go back to the day before yesterday, when I still believed in you. Since that's impossible, I'll settle for some time and space to figure out who I am without you." "You're my wife," he said, as if that explained everything. "I'm more than that," I replied. "I'm just not sure what yet." As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. James stood in our driveway, growing smaller with distance. For a moment, I felt a twinge of something. Not regret, exactly, but mourning for what might have been. 15 years of shared dreams, evaporated in an instant of betrayal. Back at Rachel's apartment, I sat on her balcony, watching night fall over Boston. My phone buzzed with messages from James, but I set it aside. Instead, I called Maddie. "Mom?" She answered immediately. "Dad said you two are having problems." "That's putting it mildly," I said, then took a deep breath. "Your father has been having an affair." The silence on the other end stretched until I thought we'd been disconnected. "Maddie, I'm here," she said finally. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I assured her. "This is between your father and me. I just wanted you to hear it from me." "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice small. "Not yet," I answered truthfully. "But I will be." 3 weeks passed in a blur of practical arrangements and emotional whiplash. Rachel's futon became less uncomfortable as days stretched into weeks. James's calls diminished from hourly to daily to occasional, his desperation fading into resignation. I spoke with Maddie every evening, our conversations careful at first, then gradually more honest as she processed her own feelings about her father's betrayal. December arrived with its first snowfall, dusting Cambridge in white. I stood by Rachel's window, watching snowflakes dance in the streetlights, feeling something shift inside me, the first stirrings of possibility rather than loss. "You should call Diane," Rachel said, handing me coffee in her chipped MIT mug. "Decide what you're doing before the holidays hit." She was right. Christmas was approaching, and with it, complicated questions. Where would I spend it? Would Maddie shuttle between her father and me? Could I face our extended family and their inevitable questions? Diane's office was decorated with tasteful holiday greenery when I arrived for our appointment. She listened as I described the confrontation and its aftermath, her expression professionally neutral. "Have you decided what you want?" she asked when I finished. I hesitated, then nodded. "I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us, solid and irrevocable. Saying them aloud should have felt devastating, but instead, I experienced a surprising lightness. "I've lived the last 3 weeks without him," I continued. "And while it hurts, it's also clarifying. I can't go back to wondering every time his phone buzzes or he comes home late." Diane nodded. "Trust, once broken, is difficult to repair. Not impossible, but difficult. And both parties must be committed to the work." "That's just it," I said. "I'm not sure I want to do that work anymore. I'm not sure he's worth it." We spent the next hour discussing logistics, Massachusetts divorce laws, division of assets, the house. I'd need to find a permanent place to live. I'd need to tell my school, our friends, our families. The practical aspects of dismantling a shared life were overwhelming, but also oddly empowering. Each decision was mine to make. Later, walking through Harvard Square, I stopped at a salon on impulse. My hair had been the same shoulder-length brown for a decade. Practical, unobtrusive, what James called classic. 90 minutes later, I emerged with a chin-length bob and subtle highlights that caught the winter sunlight. It wasn't dramatic, but it was different. Mine. That evening, I called James and asked him to meet me at a cafe halfway between our house and Rachel's apartment. Neutral territory. He arrived looking both hopeful and haggard. His eyes widened slightly at my new haircut, but he said nothing about it. "You look good," he offered instead, sliding into the seat across from me. "I'm filing for divorce," I replied without preamble. No point in small talk. He flinched as if I'd struck him. "Emma, please. We haven't even tried counseling." "I don't want to try," I said simply. "I want to move on." "After 15 years? You're willing to throw everything away because of one mistake?" 6 months of deception isn't one mistake, James. It's hundreds of daily choices to betray me. I kept my voice low, conscious of the other patrons. And it's not just the affair. It's realizing that I've spent years making myself smaller to accommodate your needs, your career, your preferences. He shook his head. "That's not fair. I supported your decision to go back to teaching." "You did," I acknowledged. "But can you name one thing I like to do that you've shown interest in?" One friend of mine you've made an effort with who wasn't connected to your work? His silence was answer enough. I'm not saying you're a villain, I continued more gently, but we've grown in different directions, and your affair just made that impossible to ignore. I ended things with Sarah, he offered, as if that changed anything. I assumed you had, I replied. But that doesn't change my decision. We discussed logistics. I would return to the house while he was at work to collect the rest of my belongings. We would tell family after the holidays to avoid ruining Christmas for everyone. Maddie would spend Christmas Eve with him, and Christmas Day with me at Rachel's. As we prepared to leave, he reached across the table and touched my hand. I do love you, Emma. I always have. I didn't pull away, but I didn't return the gesture. I believe that you believe that. But love without respect isn't enough. Outside, snow was falling again. We stood beneath the cafe awning. Two people who had once shared everything, now careful strangers. Your hair looks nice, he said finally. It suits you. Thank you, I replied, surprising myself with a small smile. I think so too. We parted ways on that quiet street, snow muffling our footsteps in opposite directions. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, grief for what we'd lost, but also a tentative excitement about what might lie ahead. For the first time in weeks, I didn't cry myself to sleep. The following day, I started apartment hunting. Cambridge rents were steep, but I found a small one-bedroom in Somerville that I could afford on my teacher's salary. It needed paint and had a temperamental radiator, but the windows faced east, promising morning light. As I signed the lease, the property manager asked, "Just you?" "Yes," I said, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. Just me. Spring arrived in New England with its characteristic indecision. Warm sunshine one day, frigid rain the next. My Somerville apartment had transformed over 4 months from an empty shell into a home that reflected only my tastes. Bookshelves lined the living room walls, filled with volumes James had always considered too literary. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable. Some pieces from our shared life, others found at estate sales with Rachel, who had become not just my niece, but my closest friend. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising civility. James, perhaps motivated by guilt, agreed to most of my requests without argument. The house would be sold, the proceeds split. My retirement account remained untouched. He kept his expensive car, I kept my practical one. You could ask for more, Diane pointed out during one of our meetings. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state. His affair gives you leverage. I don't want leverage, I replied. I want freedom. Freedom came in unexpected ways. I joined a book club at the local library, something I'd always wanted to do but had avoided because James found such gatherings pretentious. I took a weekend ceramics class and produced spectacularly lopsided mugs that nevertheless gave me immense satisfaction. I rekindled friendships that had faded during my marriage, and discovered that many had simply been waiting for me to have time for them again. Some days were still hard. I would find myself reaching for the phone to tell James about a student's breakthrough or a funny incident in the teacher's lounge, only to remember that he was no longer my first call. Holidays and anniversaries carried their own particular sting, but increasingly, the good days outnumbered the bad. Maddie visited my new apartment during her spring break, her initial wariness giving way to approval as she explored the space. "It feels like you," she said, curling up on my secondhand sofa. "Our house never really did." "What do you mean?" I asked, curious about my daughter's perception. She considered her words carefully. "That house always felt like it was designed to impress Dad's colleagues. This place feels like somewhere people actually live." Her observation startled me with its accuracy. Our marital home had indeed been selected and decorated with James's career advancement in mind. The right neighborhood, the right aesthetic, the right impression. How had I never noticed? April brought the final divorce hearing. James and I sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, connected by 15 years of history, but separated by 6 months of deception. When the judge pronounced us legally divorced, I felt a complex wave of emotion. Sadness for what might have been, relief that it was over, and a surprising surge of anticipation for what came next. Outside the courthouse, James approached me hesitantly. He looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. So that's it, he said. 15 years undone in 15 minutes. Not undone, I corrected gently. Just concluded. He nodded, hands shoved in his pockets. Maddie tells me you're dating someone. I smiled, thinking of Michael, the divorced father of one of my students. Our coffee meetings had evolved slowly from parent-teacher discussions to something more personal. Nothing serious yet, but promising. I'm getting to know someone, I acknowledged. It's early days. He's lucky, James said, his expression a mixture of regret and resignation. I hope he knows that. I hope I know that, I replied. That's the difference. We parted with an awkward hug, the physical distance between us a tangible reminder of our new reality. As I walked to my car, I realized I felt no anger toward him anymore, just a gentle sadness for the younger versions of ourselves who had promised forever without understanding how many daily choices that entailed. That evening, I sat on my small balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint Somerville's triple-deckers in shades of pink and gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, who had finally stopped trying to reconcile James and me and had instead become a staunch supporter of my new life. Divorce party this weekend? She suggested. Nothing wild, just friends, food, and officially closing one chapter to start the next. I smiled at her phrasing. That was exactly how it felt. Not an ending so much as a transition. The pain of James's betrayal had faded from an acute stabbing to a dull ache that surfaced only occasionally. In its place had grown something unexpected: gratitude. Not for the affair itself, but for the wake-up call it had provided. Without that devastating discovery, I might have continued indefinitely in a marriage that diminished rather than enhanced me. Count me in, I texted back. But let's call it a new beginning party instead. My phone rang almost immediately. Michael, calling at the time we'd arranged earlier. How did it go today? He asked, his voice warm with concern. It went, I replied. It's done. Are you okay? I considered the question carefully, wanting to be honest with him and with myself. The woman I'd been a year ago would have said yes automatically, smoothing over any complicated emotions to maintain harmony. The woman I was becoming had learned the value of truth. Not entirely, I admitted. It's a strange feeling, the official end of something that significant. But I'm also relieved. And hopeful. Hopeful is good, he said. I like hopeful. So do I agreed, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Turns out it's one of my favorite feelings.